I'm coming into this not really knowing what we're doing, but also knowing what I'm talking about. So where do you guys want to begin? Do you guys want to talk about the basically? I also don't want to give up too much that no one would know, but there's a lot of lore that happens that we know and you guys know that doesn't really get written down. So I don't know if you guys know this, but the wikis, like the Underworld wikis, are general open information. Anyone can know them. You can also choose not to, which sometimes is a good idea. But I would like to do a similar thing in terms of Mournfall's lore. That is, these are things the players should know or can know very easily if they ask around. Well, as for me, I'd like some of the things we present to be like, yeah, this is just general no knowledge that anyone at some point knows. Um, so I'm happy to give a bunch of that tonight. But also a little bit extra because again we're talking dwarves and stuff like that. Dive a little deeper into them. I at the start of the year, not at the start of the year, but at the start of the guild, we decided upon certain factions that we really wanted to be prevalent in the guild, and one of them for me was Humblebrag and was dwarves. And I will also actually say this up front. I have been someone who has not liked dwarves in lore.
Mm,
Not our own lore, but I have been not the biggest fan of dwarves in a lot of lore.
mm.
And I endeavored to change that by kind of making dwarves and like putting myself into them and like doing it. And now I kind of love dwarves. I will also
Mm.
frankly say my favorite dwarven lore is generally kind of the Warhammer dwarves, as you might have
Yeah,
picked up
they're
in
pretty
some of what I've
cool.
been
I
saying.
like
Yeah, yeah.
them. I like some of the takes that D&D does have. Mainly their like sort of families and kind of how they operate.
Yeah, and that's something I believe in too is dwarves and family. And again, I believe dwarvenic family extends almost into like you're like here's a second cousin of another cousin that you've never met, but you're like yeah
Yeah.
yeah you're part of that family. Okay. With that being said, let us start with our faction. Our local faction is called Humblebrag. For those of you who are there, you know this. For those of you who were not, you don't. Humblebrag was the first place that our PCs came to in the transition of the guild and on the way to the Mournfall settlement. The hamlet of Humblebrag was built by dwarves many years ago. It was established to house dwarven expeditions seeking to tap into valuable minerals in the mountains of eastern Yormungr. A trail a mile long runs from the village of squat huts and into the bay. This trow is combined with dwarven engineering, allowing for launches of ships and other small vessels into the water of the bay. The dwarves of Humblebrag have been joined by individuals among other races of Arthos, some seeking fortune and adventure, some wishing to explore the unexplored norths, and others simply looking for a place to get away from the rest of the world. A kind of thing about the dwarves of Humblebrag is they are not insular. As much as Mournfall is a hub, Humblebrag has always been the first hub. Anyone looking like if we're like, yo, we have an explorer from another land, Felnir, say, that wishes to come somewhere, their first port of call is Humblebrag. So Humblebrag is actually full of mixed races, but is run by dwarves, which is a interesting thing of Humblebrag. One of the unique parts of Humblebrag was basically this kind of lock. So essentially, they drove a boat in this kind of rise rose, much like a lock, and kind of docked the boat. And this is kind of what Humblebrag does. It acts as a port of call for the southern end of Yormungr. So and again, in so much as this is a frozen wasteland, so you can't just have boats like mooring offshore and stuff like that because shit's gonna freeze, right? So what Humblebrag does is basically they bring your boat up and put it almost in like a car park garage. So that alone is one of Humblebrag's biggest features, and this is the landmass of Humblebrag. So that's one of the biggest parts of Humblebrag is they can bring stuff in, they can bring ships in, they can store ships, and they deal in trade. First of all, who are new dwarves here? Who does not know dwarven lore at all, essentially?
I don't know any, and I've been playing a dwarf since
Yeah,
I
awesome.
started LARPing.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. And that's fine because dwarven lore has not been expanded or done recently at all.
I got a someone was nice enough to send me a link to the old
To
wiki
the old
page.
to the old Grenade wiki. Yep.
Yeah, and
Cool.
I mean that's I how I based my character is
Yep.
looking at that.
Which is fine, and most of that is fairly pertinent. Some of it, And honestly, when I say some of it will change, I think some of it will be expanded upon. And when I say this, quite frankly, I think I am actually probably going to be someone who ends up writing dwarves. I just have not had the time to do it. So also take what I say as Mournfall specific lore. Don't go to another guild and be like, well, Kieran said this, because I have little authority anywhere else. But I say this with authority here. And again, I say that with a double-edged sword. I'm also a global writer, so I do write a bunch of global shit. But also, I'm just a writer, right? Anyone can tell me like I don't like that idea. But this is what we are rolling with. So Gurdain exists basically in the mountains. Is the dwarven homeland, right? Is where most of the dwarves live, do their thing, have their culture. But we are going to talk more about the local dwarves of Humblebrag. So Humblebrag is a kind of an extension of Gurdain, almost like Mournfall is, but like better in functioning. Um, Essentially, dwarves have nobility, much like a lot of other places. And so basically, how dwarves work, as far as I am concerned, is they send out, again, they all live in Gurdain, but obviously there's shit to be mined elsewhere, right? So they send out kind of colonies that get run and manned, and all kind of generally or colonies that are mining or doing something that gets given back to Gurdain. And in our case, I do believe it is Mithril. So when the first nobles of Gurdain came to Humblebrag, they set up Humblebrag. They began to mine Mithril. They did their whole thing, and then as they expanded outwards, they found a very interesting area, something kind of beyond the scope of what they were told to mine. Right? They could mine Mithril from the sides of the mountains all day long, but they kind of uncovered something very interesting, which was in the old Mournfall settlement. And they mined deep and deep and deep and began to find these almost pre-done tunnels and kind of not built up, but like yeah, I mean, kind of built up. Some of you saw what they would have found underground, and I don't want to give too much away here in this, but they found something that was there, and they were like, we gotta dig this out. So as they dug deeper and deeper and deeper, and they were doing this for some time. A kind of problem happened among their people, and uh, basically, and again, we're skipping years here as we go here, but basically, the dwarves who were mining out in this area that was Mournfall, or is Mournfall really, but was exactly where we were before. Um, as they went down, they were finding, as the days went by, dwarves were kind of sleepwalking almost, and like just moving in a daze and like not doing anything or replying to commands or anything like that. Like they were just like they would wake up from their sleep and then just go and do something that was nothing to do with what they were doing, and there was no way to communicate with them, and there was almost no way to break this sleep. And this kind of acted as almost a contagious virus, if you will. So all these dwarves in these mines were like, holy shit, this is spreading, and more of them, this was happening to them. At a point, they kind of, it was getting a little out of control, and they were realizing that this was kind of a virus, like this was a spreading thing. So something I have put towards dwarves and have put towards as a very important thing is rule of law. They are not law. I mean, they are lawful, but it is not law in terms of Roland enforcing the law of the good or blah blah. For dwarves, it is like this is the written word and this is what we go by. These are the laws. What they found out, and again they left because again they were on the ground, right? And when they left and they consulted kind of the ancient book of fucking dwarven laws, they found out that they had committed a treasonous act. They were kinslayers by leaving their people, even though it was the best decision. It was what they had to do, keep themselves alive, and to stop this from spreading further. By dwarven law, they were kinslayers. So the dwarven noble at the time and those of his advisors and all of those who kind of made the decision trekked out into the mountains. And again, I ran this mod for some of you guys, and you saw the end results of it. And they killed themselves. They essentially were like tried themselves for the crime of kinslaying. The advisors and stuff slit their throats, and the leader at the time hung himself. the PCs went, and kind of anyone who was mystics or whatever, the ghosts of these dwarves kind of lamented in what they had done. New leadership takes place. Basically, there was a bit of contention for who would take control of Humblebrag. There was Ruthik. The person he had a grudge with was Bromber Foehammer. Cool thing to do could be to play a Foehammer dwarf from Humblebrag, who is the group that did not get power. So Humblebrag, essentially, after the initial leader killed himself by writ of law, he was like, I have done wrong. I have been a kinslayer. Killed himself. Two dwarven nobles who were kind of friends competed for it, and we had an event where we kind of settled a grudge, and Ruthvik became the leader of the dwarves. Ruthvik is played by Trevor, for those of you who know him, and is still currently an active character. If you look at a map and you see where Mournfall is and you follow it south, basically once you hit the sea, Humblebrag is built into where the sea and the land kind of meet. And so they act as very neutral traders in these lands. They don't really have enemies. They don't really have allies. They do their thing, and again, they're also so secure in a way that no one is really able to push them out either. Like they don't have a strong military force. They aren't threatening anyone, but also they are very defensive in a way that no one can really uproot them. But they also benefit everyone. So no one really wants to uproot them because everyone benefits from Humblebrag's existence, essentially. So going back to the dwarves who were sealed away, this, and then this, again, years have passed between these things, right? Because dwarven lifespans are what they are. So years have passed between these things, and so what happens in the tunnels below, as our PCs found out, and again, anyone you talk to can now tell you, the dwarves who were kind of plagued by this curse of sleepwalking, they were locked in that, and there was essentially a greater demon that was controlling them, which our players killed, and they have been since freed. But let me tell you that story. They were locked in there, and in their kind of nightmarish curse, and again, imagine being in a nightmare where it is a nightmare, but you also know you have no control over your body or anything like that. Like I don't know if any of you had like night terrors or whatever. Like
Sleep
imagine,
paralysis.
yeah. Imagine that, but always. And this is kind of what these dwarves went through. And then at some point in our world, and for those of you who are new, in our world, the savage gods are a recent addition. So the savage gods came into existence, and Haldora is the kind of goddess of monsters and misfits and those who have been left behind and forgotten. Haldora came to these dwarves who were left behind and forgotten, and she offered them a way out. She basically said, "Worship me, and I will free you from this." And so many of the deep dwarves did. Many of the deep dwarves turned to Haldora, and they were mostly freed from this curse, but this had and this had gone on for so long, and a thing to note is the dwarves in there, they aged, but not in a meaningful way. Like they were down there for years, and again, dwarves live fairly long lifespans. But they aged. They went through all of this, but they woke from their nightmares. But they were not okay. They did not wake from their nightmares being the dwarves they once were. They woke from their nightmares riddled with their nightmares. And for most of them, for many of them actually, they still, even upon waking, could not tell the difference between what was the nightmare and what was real. Because again, they woke from these horrible nightmares where their people betrayed them and everything was terrible. And then they woke into reality where their people betrayed them and they were stuck in a hole and they were trapped. So the line between nightmare and kind of their reality was very blurred, which drove them to a certain level of insanity. Um, and they became different. And so we have in our guild, we have a particular kind of dwarves called deep dwarves. And these are these dwarves. These are the dwarves who were trapped below. And they range from levels of sanity. Some of them are batshit insane. Some of them are only slightly insane. But they are the dwarves who were freed from this dream. But again, their freedom from the dream was not really freedom. Almost waking into this nightmare was worse a little bit because it was It was a world of two nightmares now. They struggled with what was and was not reality. Our kind of PCs discovered them, and for them, they were like, no, we don't believe you. You're not fucking real. You're just another part of the nightmare. Um, and again, that's kind of how they approached them, and they were very hostile. Um, I won't get into what they were keeping because that is somewhat of a find out in game thing. There are PCs who can tell you how this ended. I will not tell you how it ended. But again, I will tell you the tunnels did become unsealed by our players, and the deep dwarves kind of came face to face with reality, and they struggled with that. But they had done much down below as well. So what was discovered by the players, and again, maybe you were not the players to discover it, but enough people have discovered it that this is a open thing, is that the deep dwarves basically fashioned a. I'm not going to tell you exactly how it went, because that is somewhat of an in-game thing. But again, what I can say is what our players did, and a lot of this is not secrets. At a point, our players went down and they captured a deep dwarf, a absolutely mad fucking deep dwarf who knew what was going on, and he told them what they were like. What's it take to stop the nightmare? Because at the time, the nightmare was spreading at this point. The kind of realm of nightmares was moving into the world that our players were living in, and they were like, okay, like what the fuck is going on? And again, the people they had to rely on were batshit insane madmen who had been stuck in tunnels and don't know the difference between reality and life. So they captured a particularly handsome and charismatic deep dwarf who basically could only communicate by writing upon tablets. And this is all he did. He wrote upon tablets, but he would write more or less sane history and lore. So they came and they captured him, and he wrote kind of what had happened. When they were freed by Haldora, they broke free of this, and again to try to break some of their people free. And again, this was a bloodbath even among themselves. Um so sorry, something I actually missed on this is the sleepwalking dwarves had no problem killing their own. And so even the dwarves who had killed them, or sorry, locked them away, even though they were killing them, they knew they did not do it in their own minds. So there was a bloodbath in these tunnels, essentially. So anyone who would try to pull them out would get attacked, which is why they actually left them, because they were like, we can't even take them away because they will attack us if we do. So a kind of almost secondary war happened between the awakened dwarves and the sleepwalkers. The awakened, who are also insane, and the sleepwalkers, who are, well, sleepwalking. And basically the awakened dwarves got to a point where they were able to seal the tunnels from going deeper. And they sealed it with a spear. This spear was called the Dream Piercer. The deep dwarves who had lived through the nightmare and were awakened through Haldora were above, still insane, but had sealed it all below. Now RPCs came in and they stole that spear and they unsealed everything. Key piece of advice: do not take my telling of history, no matter how I tell it, as a true objective side of history. We've talked about this just even in terms of global stuff. Underworld history is always presented from a bias. It kind of ended in this weird spot with the Deep Dwarves, where at the end of the day, the PCs actually killed what was causing the Deep Dwarves the problem. And the problem was a greater demon of Nilostramus. And again, for you new people, I know I'm throwing a lot of lore around now, and this is not particularly dwarf stuff. And this was the creature causing all the problems. This was essentially what had corrupted these dwarves, had taken over their brains to make them mine deeper. And so the players killed this, but by doing so, kind of like betrayed the deep dwarves. So the deep dwarves, well, hateful of the PCs, have also been all now freed of the dream walking. Do you guys have any questions?
I do.
Ask away.
How? Again, I'm going to create a dwarf, and I was hoping to do it from that town.
Yep.
Would that? I don't want a deep dwarf is different than a mountain dwarf, or
Yeah. So for now, you cannot create a deep dwarf. Frag races, they come and go. And frag races get tested, and frag races get put out there, and we have essentially more or less continuously presented two frag races from our guild, which is gnolls and deep dwarves. I think global will accept deep dwarves before they accept gnolls. Deep dwarves are a separate race, and again, by being thrown down there and going through what they have done, they have become a separate race. But yes, if you want to create a dwarf from Humblebrag, I will say this now. Currently, you cannot create a deep dwarf.
but I could make a mountain dwarf that just is from that town.
Absolutely. You can be from Humblebrag 100%. Like, if you want to be from somewhere, I encourage you to make it local. You don't have to. You can be from where the fuck you want. But if you make it local, it makes it so much easier to come to you. And again, I know how new, as a new PC, you come and you're a little overwhelmed sometimes. You're like, what do I do? There's all these stories. There's all this blah blah. But if you were tied to something, it makes it so much easier for us to come to you as a new PC and be like, hey, you're a dwarf who's from this faction, or a whatever who's from this faction, blah blah. Cool. And again, my a good friend of ours, Trevor, plays Ruthvik, the king. Not the king. The Thane. The Thane of Humblebrag. And again, Ruthvik has come to town many times. So if Ruthvik comes and is like, "You're one of our people," blah blah, it is so easy to give you a plot and a story, and to give you something to bite onto and be a part of.